Next up, though, we are so excited to have Olivia Bechtel back. For those of you who had the pleasure of joining us at our Leadership Summit back in November, Olivia was one of our panelists, and she was wonderful. And unfortunately, all of our ladies were so wonderful, we did a little too much talking, and we didn't get through everything we were going to do. So we got some great feedback, and we decided to invite Olivia back today as our keynote speaker for our kickoff. So Olivia is here. She is a member of the sales team at Evergreen. She is also the owner of LyvWell, which is her personal coaching and wellness business. And I would love to welcome her to the stage, and she's going to spend the next 45 minutes or so with all of us with lots of good stuff to say.
Excellent. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's it?
Good
Come on now. Good morning, everybody.
Good
morning. So for starters, thank you so much for inviting me back. I am so excited. Part of the reason this is so exciting to me is because I feel like this is an opportunity to bring my life's work into work. When we started the conversation about wellness, one of the conversations that came up after that was about, like, how do we do it? So the majority of my conversation today is really focused in on enacting change in your life. So yes, I am Olivia Bechtel, also Olivia, soon to be Bechtel. Not because we're engaged to get married, we did that almost a year ago, but because I'm finally getting around to legally changing my last name. I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, if you see Olivia Bechtel, you're not like, who is this person? And two, it's to share that even though we're going to talk about this optimizing, that I too am a human whose to-do list shifts and changes as priorities shift and change. So I'm going to talk about all this stuff. I don't want to be put on a pedestal. My life shifts as well as everyone else's. So I actually started in the building industry as a 16-year-old, so I'm nearly 17 years in. It was actually as an intern working for a national production builders title company that I saw even as an intern I could have impact. I was able to help this title company go paperless, which for you young people was a very big deal in the early mid-2000s, and it was by streamlining their post-closing process. So with this in mind, I went to Holmes University to study business and psychology because I felt like those two things coming together would enable me to help businesses to increase their workflow. I was very interested in that. While I was at school and for a period of time afterwards, I experienced a really dark place. It was what I would now refer to as my rock bottom. The reason I share this with you is because I have had so many beautiful things happen in my life since then. The transformation that I've experienced has inspired me to help other people to transform their lives. That is where the birth of my business, LyvWell, came from. Is I felt so good, and I just want to help other people to feel well as well. So at this point, I have 9 years experience as a coach doing what I call lifestyle engineering. It's really a fancy way to say helping people kind of get their shit together and create standard operating procedures for their life. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of practical tools to enact change, approaches to life and to work. We're going to have a lot of conversation about self-assessment. It's going to come up time and time again because ultimately we can't get to where we want to go if we don't know where we're starting. So I also ask while you're doing these initial self-assessment tools, be kind to yourself, be loving to yourself. You don't need to just come in immediately and beat yourself up about where you are. That's not actually going to progress us forward. My goal today is if one person walks away with one tool and actually sees positive impact in their life, I will feel that I have fulfilled what I'm here to do today. So, first disclaimer, I've got a lot to get through. I will be sending out a cheat sheet, so don't feel the need to manically write things down. All of these tools have been researched and are backed. I will not be sharing the citations of what university at what time conducted what study to figure out this information. I'd be happy to provide it, but I also encourage you with not only what I'm talking about today, but any information that's ever presented to you, do your own research. Figure out if it's a good fit for you. Trust yourself to know what is right for you, which actually brings me to my second disclaimer. I trust that everyone in this room knows themselves better than anyone else in this room. So for the following tools that we discuss, if something's not right for you, don't do it. A great example is at one point I talked about how integrating coconut water into like your daily hydration is beneficial for potassium. If you have chronic kidney disease, that means coconut water is not an option for you. So don't start drinking coconut water because, well, Liv said, what's a coconut water? As Tim Ferriss says, I am not a doctor. I'm certainly not your doctor, and please don't do anything stupid. So again, I really am encouraging you to know yourself before we move forward. So this is gonna bring us to our first tool. We're gonna run through a grounding exercise. It is based off of a yogic practice. So I'm gonna ask everyone to sit up really nice and tall, both feet on the floor. I want you to imagine, and feel free to close your eyes if it helps you sink into your body, but I want you to imagine that there's a clear string gently pulling your crown up to the sky, and I want you to think about pressing your feet into the floor as though you're trying to move the earth away from you. So once you start to feel the length in your spine, I'm gonna ask you to think about your toes. Get in there, can you give them a wiggle? Can you say something nice to them? When was the last time you said, oh, you cute little toes? And then we're gonna mentally move to the center of our foot, and then to our ankles, and up into our calves. Notice as we do this, if there are any parts of your body that are saying, wait, don't move so fast, stay with me, hang out, meet them, enjoy it. Coming up into our knees, and into our thighs. When was the last time you said something nice to your thighs? And into our bellies. Hi, tummy. And up into our hearts, into our throats, into our sinuses. Can you find the center of your forehead? And then the top of your head, feeling that invisible string pulling you upward. Excellent. So those of you who are closing your eyes, I welcome you to open them. So this is based off of the Yoga Nidra technique, which is actually a phenomenal tool to break stress. You're switching from one of your nervous system's primary functions to another one. You're literally shifting into different parts of your brain. An actual Yoga Nidra technique is phenomenal for falling asleep, and there are tons of guided meditation, which I'll talk about later. This is going to bring us into our second tool. So for this second tool, I'm going to start by explaining and demonstrating, and then I'm going to lead you through it. We're going to do what's called a physiological sigh. So again, know yourself. If this is not right for you, it's not right for you. Just leave it at the door. So the way this is performed is you're going to think about taking a deep inhale. You're trying to get your lungs like pretty well full of air, but you're not trying to explode them. It doesn't need to be forceful. At the end of this long inhale, you're going to take a short second inhale, and then you're going to sigh it all out. Feel free to make sounds. I think it helps. So I'm going to demonstrate and then lead you through it. So deep inhale in. I want you, while you do this, to notice, do your shoulders drop? Does the tongue leave the roof of your mouth? Do you feel softness in your jaw? So everyone together, a nice deep inhale in. Second inhale in, and so this physiological sigh, it has been proven to be the quickest way to shift yourself out of acute stress. Anyone who works with me, if they don't hear me bebopping to music, they probably hear me every so often, because I use it as a tool to reset myself. So hopefully with that, we're feeling a little bit less of the chatter in the brain, and we're feeling into our bodies. We're sinking into this present moment. It seems appropriate to start the conversation with mindfulness, because ultimately mindfulness is going to be the foundation in which we can enact change, which is just leaks into everywhere in our life. So the thing about mindfulness in particular that I want to talk about is self-talk. I want to talk about the chatter that goes in on your brain. For starters, these internal narratives, they're our mental framework in which we use to perceive and make sense of the world around us. I like to call these stories. So something to be mindful of with these stories is we have intentionally built these stories because it's how we decide what do these things mean. I'm going to encourage you with this conversation to examine your stories and figure out what stories are helpful to you and which ones are harmful. So a practical tool, and again, I'll send you this list of questions, but a practical tool when examining these stories are to ask yourself, first and foremost, how do you talk to yourself about yourself? Are you encouraging? Are you your cheerleader? Or are you a mean girl? Are you nasty to yourself? Are there areas in your life where you're hypercritical of your behaviors? And are there places where you're kind? Do you support your own dreams? How do you feel when you want to take on something new? Does that voice say, yes, let's try something new? Or does it say, honey, that's like outside of what you're capable of? So additionally with these stories, like as I mentioned, are they helpful or are they limiting? So when you find a limiting story, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, I want you to ask yourself, is this a real roadblock? And what's the risk if I act differently? Sometimes if you have an opportunity to examine the risk that exists, you might realize there's really no risk at all to changing your behaviors and the things that you tell yourself. I encourage you to ask yourself how and why questions often and without judgment. We listen, but we don't judge. For any of you on TikTok. And then one of the things I want you to be mindful of while you are doing this self-assessment of your stories is what does the language look like that you use? So there is this practice called neuro-linguistic programming, which suggests that the wording of our thoughts actually impact how we show up in the world. So my most favorite example of this is taking two statements, which when you hear them, definitely have the same goal in mind, but they're very different approaches. And those are, I don't want to be late, and I want to be on time. So the goal is the same, it's arriving to a particular destination at a spot on the clock, but one of it is focused in on what you don't want, lateness, and one is focused on what you do want, which is being on time. So I encourage you, when you're listening to these stories, listen to where is your focus, because the brain doesn't hear not late, it just hears late. My energy's on late, my focus is on late, oh my gosh, these are all the reasons I'm late, I'm a failure because I'm late, and it can absolutely start to cascade. So when you're rewriting your thoughts and your stories that you have with yourself, I really encourage you to drop the no's and the nots. Instead of saying, I don't want to be late, how can you get in yourself when you say, I want to be on time? This is a small way to empower yourself towards actionable change. Because remember, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So let's rewrite those stories so they support our long-term goals. So one of the reasons that I love this conversation about stories and about thoughts is so many of us are running around on an internal dialogue and it rules our lives. So are there thoughts, when thoughts come into your head, one of the things I tell people is if you're kind of like driving along and a thought comes up, ask yourself, does this benefit me? Is it useful to me? If the answer is no, I like to physically crumple it up and blow it into the wind. If I call them floater thoughts, comes in and is something that is going to be useful for later, it is incredibly beneficial to have a trusted resource in where this thought can lie. So for me, I have quite a commute from the middle of nowhere, West Loudon, to Chantilly, and I have a lot of thoughts that come in and I'm like, I can't do anything about that now. So I voice to text myself, and I just send myself text messages. Now I have to actually go back and read the text messages for this to be a beneficial tool, but I'm also trying to demonstrate that it's small and it's something you might already have access to that will allow you to kind of change how you interact with your own thoughts. The benefits to mindfulness around stories is it puts you in a position where you're empowered to respond instead of react. Oftentimes we react when the emotions are greater than our skills or capacities. So along with the stories in our head, it's important to think about what do our daily lives look like. I like to call them routines and rituals because I'm a little bit of a hippie. But it's really just standard operating procedure. How do you move through the world? So routines are a bunch of habits that are strung together. So I think the first way to really discuss how we change these habits to improve our lives is making peace with the reasons why habits are hard to change. So we are programmed to kind of be lazy. We are programmed to minimize caloric output at any given opportunity. That's why our body, when you'll be like, I want to do this, something inside's like, I want to negotiate with you to maybe not do that. So we have to remember, our body's like, I might need those calories in case of famine or running away from a bear. Well, thankfully, now I might have to worry about a bear chasing me, because again, I live in the middle of nowhere, but knock on fake material, not gonna happen. You also have to remind yourself that they are automated, and automated tasks are hard to change unless you know the programming. I want to demonstrate how mindless automated tasks are. Who here, without thinking about it, knows which shoe they put on first in the morning? So we have two people. We have two people who know, three people who know what shoe they put on first. It's because our brain does not want to waste time thinking, I put this one on, and then I put this one on. The other thing about these programmings and why they're so hard to change is they're old. Our initial programs happen as children, and then every iOS update on top of that is just based off of that old programming. The other reason habits are hard to break, they provide us with a reward. We love treats. We love prezzies. And sometimes that treat is just comfort. It's just the fact that you know what's going to happen. We love predictable circumstances. We shy away from things that we're not so sure about because, calories out, I can't. And they're also fatiguing. Changing the way you think, your brain's like, this is taking so much effort, and it's just rather not. So, with the conversation with routines, now we're like, okay, well, which habits is it that we actually need to focus on? What I like to do with my clients is I have them take a self-assessment of what their current days look like. Write out in as much detail as possible, what does your current life look like? Things that people come back to me and say is, one, they are spending way more time on their phone than they realize they are. They, particularly in the morning, the amount of time that we are mindlessly spending on our phone before we even start the day is astronomical. Once you have an opportunity where you really write out what your standard day is, I'm gonna encourage you to visualize what your ideal day looks like. I am gonna be providing a link for a guided visualization for your ideal day. I love this because ultimately, how are you gonna figure out what areas you should work on if you have no idea what you want your life to look like? The other thing I love about visualization is it feels like daydreaming with a purpose, and that's just so romantic. So I really do encourage people to consider this practice. Once you've kind of visualized what your ideal looks like, I encourage people to not get too honed in on the time blocking. That is to figure out when we talk about our executive functioning skills. But determine, who do you want to see in your ideal day? What does your ideal day include? How do you show up? This gives us an opportunity to assess the current skills we have and the skills we need to build in order to get to that ideal day. Once we've started to identify the gaps between where you are and where you would like to be, we can decide on those habits and build those skills. A great way to enact change in your life, how to get things moving, is to get moving. Now, I'm a mobility nerd, so I definitely recognize my own bias that I'm always going to encourage movement being the first thing that we take a look at before any of the other areas of our life. But it's also because it's an incredibly powerful tool to stack other habits with it, and you can also feel it so quickly in our body. And again, our brains and our bodies love the juice of that instant reward. If you do a couple bicep curls and you haven't done it before, you're like, whoo, I am feeling it. And there is something about that response that we really, really enjoy. So pro tip, you want to get things moving, start getting moving. And it does not have to be mobility, it doesn't have to be weightlifting, it can be dancing. Besides making my noises, I can be oftentimes seen just bebopping around, enjoying being in my body. So with that being said, we're gonna talk about like, okay, so how do we actually build habits? Make the change teeny, teeny, tiny. I don't love this next phrase, and if anyone has better suggestions for it, I'm open to it. But the best way I can say it is you eat the elephant one bite at a time. Don't try to take on the whole elephant. You just one teeny tiny change. Mine, for example, is like I'll start with something like when I took a break from movement, I told myself if you drive to the gym and you go up and you put your fob on the door, you can leave. I'm like, that's easy enough. I can do that. So I would go to the gym, I put the fob on the door, and I said, well, I might as well go in. Drove the whole full 7 minutes to get here. And it started off with just 2 minutes on the treadmill, walking at a very slow pace. And I said, you know, not only have I met my goal, I've exceeded it. So I get instant wins. So make it teeny, teeny, tiny. And give yourself grace when it's hard to do something new. Does anyone remember how hard it was to learn to tie, speaking of shoes earlier, do you remember how hard it was to learn to tie your shoes? I can't tie them, everyone else has tied their own shoes, I can't figure, and again, it's now something that we do so automatically, we can't even remember which shoe we start with in the morning. So another thing I encourage when you're trying to build habits is get explicitly clear on your why. Why do you want this habit? This is also a great opportunity to create mantras for yourself that you can come back to when you're not feeling like doing it, because let's get real, a lot of the time you're not gonna feel like doing it. So if you remember what your why is, it really allows you to have something to ground to in those moments when you're negotiating with yourself. Understanding like habits and how you can stack them together is also incredibly beneficial. Great easy example is flossing. Say you're not flossing, but you religiously brush your teeth and wash your face. Put the new habit smack dab in between the two established habits. It is the easiest way, instead of being like, well, I'm just gonna floss. It's like, okay, your brain's like, that's useless. That doesn't have anything to attach to. This is too much intention I have to put into it. Leave it at the door. Another great thing besides habit stacking is understanding the habit loop, which is we have a trigger, we have a response, which is the habit, and we have the reward. The example I use, because this is me, is I'm bored, so I'm gonna eat a snack, so I now have something to do. Well, when I realized the reward outside of something really yummy is the fact that it is filling and satisfying my boredom, I can say, I'm bored, this isn't gonna sound as fun, I'm gonna read a book, I now have something to do. Very quickly, you'll start to recognize when you're doing things and what it is that you're trying to satisfy, and a lot of times what you're trying to satisfy is like not that deep. I also encourage you to experiment with your habits. Choose curiosity over fear and stop negotiating with yourself. If you have two snacks in front of you and one is full of protein and is gonna help you with your goals, but this one's like chocolatey and gooey and delicious, ask yourself, which of these are aligned with ultimately what I want? I like to remind myself of short and long-term consequences, which is short-term, is it the snack that I want right now? Or is it the health that I've been trying to build towards for years? Give yourself practical mantras. So a lot of people will ask me, they're like, I just can't keep my house clean. I just like, no matter what, there's always this area where just like everything goes to die. So many people have like a chair of clothing death. It's like, they're not really dirty enough to be washed, but like, I'm not really ready to hang them up. So they just live in the chair. So in our household, and Benjamin can speak to this because I know it's his favorite mantra, is we don't put stuff down, we put it away. I am constantly trying to get everything ready for its next use. You know what this does? This means we're never looking for car keys. We're never having to do some micro unanticipated steps before we can actually do the action. A great one is dumping the coffee grounds out in the morning. And so we really do use these as tools to kind of create the life that we want. I'm also a big fan of reducing friction. Make it as easy as possible. A great way to do this is preparation. I feel like so many times people get so hung up on like, this is my morning routine, get ready with me. And I'm like, guys, the secret sauce is the night before. I have turned our nighttime routine into what I suggest to anyone who is struggling with time management. Turn your nighttime routine into a game. How many areas of my life can I actually get ahead of this evening? So the way I gamify this is I'll do like, okay, how much stuff can I get done before the oven's done preheating? Well, I can pack my lunch for tomorrow, I can get my protein prepped for the morning, get all my cutie little supplements out, and then it turns into this like, oh, well, what more can I do? And again, start with one tiny small thing. Maybe it's laying your work clothes out. Oh, I love a good costume. I don't think of these as outfits, I think of them as costumes, and if my costume doesn't match what I'm trying to do for the day, I will stand there. No. Well, what I have learned is it is so much easier to do that at 6:30 the night before than at 6:30 the day of. So again, try to do what you can to reduce the friction in your life to get these habits going. And then it's 2025, guys. Use apps. There are so many ways to track habits, to build habits, and we actually are going to be discussing some of my favorites a little farther down. So in order for these habits to actually get built into routines, we have to have a plan of execution. I believe every aspect of life is just a project to manage, which my background, I was a project manager before I joined the sales team at Evergreen, and the reason I loved it so much is I was like, you have the same goal regardless of the project, and I feel people in the building industry will get this. You want to have clear specs, and you want to be on time and under budget. Every project you do in your life, that is the goal. So for a lot of times for habits, it's not actually under budget, it's like energetically under budget. How can I make sure my output's going to ultimately make sense? So we've talked about getting clear on specification. That's what a lot of the mindfulness and self-talk is about. Now we're going to be discussing the two other aspects, and I think the best way to do that is to discuss executive functioning tools. So executive functioning is going to be this part of your brain that handles planning, organization, time management, task regulation, self-regulation, attention control. For all of my other fellow ADHD girlies in here, I'm sure this sounds like a really exciting list of things to be working for and on. But the reality is there are tools to kind of help bridge the gaps. So the number one tool for increasing your executive functioning skills, and I'm sure this will shock everyone, is put your phone away. Put the phone away. So for any of my clients, one of the things I ask them to do, and I suggest everyone do the same, if you haven't checked in on how much screen time you're spending, take a look at it. It's available on everyone's phones. The majority of the clients who I have that come in and say the number one resource that gets in the way of them getting their things done is time, and then they find out and realize they're spending 6.5 hours on their phone every day. That's over a third of your waking life is spent on the phone. Now, this is where the stories come up, right? Well, I'm a salesperson, I have to have my phone on me, I have to be available at any time. What if someone sends me a critically emergency email? Fine, use it as a tool, but stopping over at Instagram land because, oh, it looks like my mom sent me another meme of Australian Shepherd puppies. I can definitely watch that now before I actually read that email that inspired me to pick up my phone. Additionally, when it comes to executive functioning tools, the reason people have so much internal mental chatter that just won't go away is because your brain is lacking the trust that you're going to actually do anything with it. It's like, well, I have to remind you because you don't actually park this information anywhere that's going to be revisited. So I always have everyone set up what is referred to as a second brain. This is where everything lives that I don't want to be talking up here. So the way I usually encourage people to start a second brain is actually by something I call a brain dump. It is setting 2 to 3 hours aside on your calendar, phones on D&D, nothing will get in the way of this 2 to 3 hour meeting. I encourage people to treat it as though it's an appointment with someone else. You're in time to appointments with other people. You give them your attention. You're not like, oh, let me get on Instagram real quick while you're telling me what fits and finishes you want in your house. No, you are there with them. So be your own client. During this brain dump, a great process, and this is really broken out beautifully in the book Getting Stuff Done, as well as Eat This Frog. If anyone's interested in this stuff and like love self-improvement, let me know. I'll hit you with my Audible library. The idea is you write everything out on separate cards, and then you're gonna break them up into groups. You have musings or tickler file, which is like stuff you'd like to at some point do, and then you have actual tasks attached to projects. The tasks that are attached to projects, a great approach to really just getting things done. Break them up into the things that are 5 minutes, and then everything else either gets assigned to a project or labeled a legitimate task. Give yourself a non-negotiable requirement that you will get all 5-minute tasks done. If you go in there, and not in any particular order, 5-minute tasks, we don't need to go through like an Eisenhower matrix and decide what's important and what's urgent. Just get them done. And by the time you're done with your 5-minute tasks, usually a couple of 5-minute tasks have joined the ranks, but those are for your next round of 5 minutes. At this point, we then look at our tasks and projects and say, okay, how do we figure out what we do first? Things that are urgent and important, you do. Things that are not urgent, but still important, you schedule. Tasks that are urgent but not important, you delegate. So one of the challenges I have for everyone today is take one task that you would normally just do because it hit your desk. You might have 7 other people around you who could easily do it, but you just do it. And ask those people, those capable people, to do this task. And then tasks that aren't urgent or important, you either delete them or you park them in that musings file. You don't need to worry about things that are not urgent and important at this point. Time blocking your schedule. One of my favorite things to encourage my team to do at work and with LyvWell, breaking up your schedule into 20-minute increments using the Pomodoro method is a great approach to getting things done. It ultimately is just giving you guidance, which again, our brains love it. They absolutely love it. One of the tools, Chris, if you would please pull up Motion. Are you able to, that's fine. So this is an AI scheduling tool that I use. This is kind of like my Bible for how my days go. And it's because I've decided the tasks that are on my Motion calendar are non-negotiable. So if Motion tells me it is now time to, like, what's something great I've got on there? Afternoon vitamins. Afternoon vitamins. I forget about afternoon vitamins all the time. Absolutely all the time. That's why they actually have to have a spot on my calendar. So when it's time to do that, we just absolutely do it. This is also a great technique if there are things, again, that you don't feel the pressure to get done, but you would like to. Additional training, continuing education courses. Well, if you have enough time that you don't have to do in this moment, these are the things that tend to get pushed and pushed and pushed, and then by the time they're actually due, you're crawling out of your skin with anxiety because now they are important and urgent. So set yourself up to do things when they're in between instead of when they have become both. Chris, could you do the next one, please? So this app is what is like an abbreviated to-do list for me. And I have intentional timers going off. Okay, so like I don't trust my brain to keep track of anything because it will just continue to be like, you need to do this, you need to do this. So what I did that this particular day is you see I've got groupings from 8:20 to about 10 and then 1 p.m. These are the times I was intending to be in a car. These are the times that I'm passing these places. I don't want to take up in my schedule return that at UPS. I'm like, no, I just need to know when I'm in the approximate location of the UPS store that I'm intending to drop something off. So I use this as a supplementary tool for kind of the small to-dos. They're usually about 5-minute tasks, but they are tied to, like, you want that trigger at a specific interval. So one of the things to also be considering when you're doing and creating habits and using these tools is create standard operating procedures for yourself, and use AI to help you with these reoccurring tasks. Everyone at Evergreen knows I love my little robot. He writes so many emails for me. I've had people be like, oh my gosh, this template you put together. I'm like, yeah, I spent hours putting this together, guys. And the reality is I've just gotten really good at prompting ChatGPT. The amount of times, I'm a wordsmith, so I used to spend so much time with client emails because I'm like, I want them to know I care. Words are important. But the reality is when I'm initially writing that email, it really is, I wanna express this, I wanna express this. Yes, it's gonna cost this much. No, you're wrong about that. So what I do is I say to ChatGPT, please rewrite the following in a professional yet friendly tone. And it, because that is what I'm after, is professional and friendly, it will spit it out. And a lot of times I do go back and adjust, but my gosh, that's 30, 45 minutes that I would usually spend trying to tailor this email for this audience that I now get back. And then I take that and I'm like, well, I'm gonna flag you because I'm definitely using that email again. And it becomes a template for me so I can kind of minimize the amount of effort these reoccurring tasks take. One of the important things when you're doing any of these executive functioning skills and creating tasks and creating new habits and rituals for yourself is you have to make time to take self-audits. The only way that you're going to be able to get to a place where you really know, like, is this working, is by taking some time to actually check in. Is this working? Is this meeting my goal? What else about this kid has an opportunity to adapt and change? And then this one in particular, I really want to touch on is boundaries when it comes to kind of like executive functioning and taking care of ourselves. The word boundaries for a lot of people can be like a little triggering. It sounds like, ooh, I'm not allowed to do things. It feels that it might be a little bit of a prison. But the reality is boundaries provide you freedom. The more boundaries you have for how you behave, how your time goes, what you are willing to do for other people, the clearer you get on that, the more easily you can move through life. And I've got news for you on boundaries. Women, it has been modeled for us since we were itty bitty littles that we need to be paying attention to everyone's needs, and it is our responsibility to fulfill them. Well, I got news for you. It's not. You are allowed to take care of your needs, and it is okay if people are inconvenienced by that. Ultimately, you taking care of your needs is what allows you to have a cup that runneth over, and that is the only time you can pour from that cup. It's not about pouring from a full cup, it's about having more than enough and then being able to share it with people. Remember that discipline is not the same as grit. Discipline is you learning your body and your systems and what will work for you. So what looks like discipline to me may not be what looks like discipline for you. So again, be kind with yourself. These systems only need to work for you. They don't need to work for anyone else. And then one of the things that I want to very briefly touch on that supports all of this is some biohacking techniques. It's important for wellness and it's also important for enacting change. So for starters, get out of your head and get into your body. The physiological side is a great way to do that. I also like to tell myself, drop my tongue from the roof of my mouth. And all of a sudden it brings awareness, like, I don't even know my tongue was up there. Relax the jaw, drop the shoulders, shake, give yourself a little dance break. Breath work, any type of intentional breathing at all, any amount is beneficial. It can be that physiological sigh we talked about, it can be box breathing, it can be yogic breathing, but just breathe and do it with meaning. Movement, as I've said, if there's one thing that you add to your life, movement is phenomenal. For women, for really everyone, for longevity, the things that are most important are keeping range of motion and developing strength. So if there are only 3 movements that you add to your day that you're currently not doing, I suggest the following. 1 is going to be taking your shoes on and off standing up. There's this thing that happens that we have a period of time where we'll do it standing up, and then it goes to putting it up on a surface, and then all of a sudden we're sitting down. I really encourage you to work on putting your shoes on, standing up. Now you can be leaning against something, take baby steps. You can be leaning against something, you can have a hand on something, you can be doing some wiggling, but take your shoes on and off standing up. Getting on and off the ground. For some people it's like, I can get on and off the ground. Well, unless it is something you are doing, you will hit a stage of your life where getting on and off the ground is harder. Falls are one of the #1 leading causes of death for people in a certain age group, and no one ever thinks it's going to be a fall, and part of the reason it is because they haven't touched the ground with their hands in a very, very long time. So please practice getting on and off the ground. And then my 3rd movement suggestion is a primal squat. I am gonna demonstrate, just so you guys know, I got leggings on, like no one's gonna see anything weird. And if you do not have this as an available range of motion, I encourage it to be something that you work up to. So a primal squat is coming down and sitting back on top of your heels. You can do some rocking, but this movement in itself, every culture that lives in a blue zones are the people who have been noted to live the longest. Primal squat is all part of their cultural daily practices. The reason this position is particularly important is this is a range of motion that if you get yourself in a bad spot, you can get yourself out of it. These ranges of motion, dorsiflexion, hip flexion, are also like incredibly important to our group of muscles called the psoas. The psoas connects the lower half of your body to the upper half. It's the only one that does that. There's only one group of muscles that connect the two. And yogic practice is actually called the soul muscle. So those are my 3 movement things. And then outside of that, push your coffee. No caffeine until 90 minutes after waking. There have been studies to show that people that actually caffeinate first upon waking are the ones that complain most about it being hard to wake up. This is because you're usually taking a high dose of a stimulant the moment you wake up, and your body hasn't even had an opportunity to flush the sleepy chemicals out of your body. So push your caffeine by 90 minutes. Women, actually everyone, I encourage you to have at least 15 grams of protein within the first 30 minutes of waking. It's a great way to jumpstart your metabolism. Everyone hates this one, intentional cold exposure. 1 minute of a cold shower at the very end of your shower. It's gonna jumpstart your metabolism. It feels awful, but the moment you get out of it, you feel yoked. You're like, I'm a superhuman. Besides this, there are a couple of really phenomenal tools that I do encourage you to bring into your daily life. Being barefoot on the grass, having 15 to 20 minutes of intentional sun exposure in the morning without sunglasses on. A beautiful technique that I love is called horizontal gazing. We spend so much time like this that when you actually look far away, not only does it relax the eyes, it lowers your levels of fatigue, but it also allows your nervous system to just chill out a little bit. It's especially beneficial to people who experience headaches. Outside of that, absolutely, hydration is important. 1 ounce per pound of body weight is what is suggested. I love adding electrolytes into that. I drink coconut water during the day and aloe vera at night for the magnesium. That magnesium absolutely helps me get to sleep. And then actually, Chris, MyFitnessPal, this is an app that I use to track my food intake. And it's just to demonstrate that there are tools out there that can really help you figure out what's going on. I always have clients download my fitness pal and I say, don't start with goals. I just want to know what you're eating every day. Besides that, a couple of things to be mindful of is, track your fuel, ergonomic setups at work. I'm a stand-up girly with a walking pad and the weird split keyboard and the mouse. I love it. You feel phenomenal. You don't end up with the fatigue in the wrist, carpal tunnel. And sitting is a chronic issue in the United States. Outside of this, just gonna very briefly touch on sleep because everyone always asks. I have a 2-hour rule. 2 hours before bed, you cut the crap that's keeping you up, and it's also the time you start doing the things that help you get to sleep. So 2 hours before bed, you put the phones are off, TVs are off, red lights are on, charge your phone outside your bedroom, gasp, there are things called alarm clocks. And then outside of that, the magnesium, practicing the yoga nidra. A cool trick is actually using your thermostat as a biohacking tool. The body needs to cool down in order to get to sleep at night, and then your temperature rises upon waking. I don't know if this happens to any of you, but I'll be in a nice cozy sleep, and then out of nowhere I'm awake and I'm ferociously hot. Well, even though I had just felt like I was peacefully sleeping, because the temperature of the room is saying to my body, hey, you need to be waking up now, you were just pulled from your sleep. So I tell people cooler in the evenings, about 60 minutes before waking, you can go ahead and increase your temperature by 2 to 3 degrees in the room, and it can actually naturally encourage you to wake up. My last little thing before we get going is actually something Maya had touched on from the beginning, which is community. So I really want to encourage you to take a look at what your communities look like. Do they encourage you? Do they support you? Are these relationships productive or are they draining? Do they bring out the best version of you? And just so you all know, and I've been very guilty of this, is one of my favorite pastimes at one point was venting. I'm just gonna get it out and I'm sure I'll feel better. Studies have proven that venting only actually takes those things and drives them deeper into your habit and your frontal lobe and all that fun stuff. So venting, unfortunately, is incredibly, incredibly unproductive. In communities, try to set yourself up so you give more than you take. That is really how you, in my personal opinion, find a lot of success in the group of people you surround yourself with. Seek out mentorships, seek out coaches, find a group of people that you're like, I think they're really badass. How do I get a seat at their table? You are who you spend time with, so really take a look at who those individuals are and what they bring to your life. Because ultimately, support, trust, and collaboration are gonna fuel your successes. So remember, your life experience is just a series of daily choices. So make a choice and make it for you. I encourage you to track one habit, just start there, make it itty bitty bitty, gamify your life, relabel your failures as lessons, give yourself grace, and experiment. Experiment with your lifestyle, experiment with your hobbies, experiment with your habits, focus on integration, not restriction, and remember that self-love is not about keeping yourself comfortable, it's about keeping the promises you've made to yourself. I really, really hope that, and I've seen some head nodding and some smiles and wonderful things, I hope that you all walk away today with just one thing that makes you feel like you're living a little better, that it enables you to live well.
Yay.